Into the death of anti-apartheid activist Dr Neil Aggett has heard testimony from Keith Coleman. Coleman was detained at the then John Vorster Square police station in Johannesburg at the same time as Aggett. Coleman gave details of how he endured torture at the hands of security police. Aggett was found hanging in his cell in the police station in the early hours of the 5th of February 1982. Coleman says security police were proud of their treatment of political prisoners. Last week, forensic pathologist Steve Naidu said it was very insensitive to hurriedly conduct the post-mortem a few hours after Aggett had died, before even his family could formally identify the body. Former security branch police officer Paul Erasmus is expected on the stand next. Let's get more on the story across to our reporter Hasina Gori, who has been following this inquest. Very good afternoon to you, Hasina. More harrowing details, I'm sure, emerging at that inquest into the death of Dr. Neil Aggett.
Yes, Nzinga, certainly more details that have come out this morning here at the Johannesburg High Court. Details from the last detainee that we're hearing on the stand, explaining his experience in John Vorster. Unlike other detainees, he says he was one of the lucky few that was only verbally and mentally assaulted and not physically. But he said that he did see others coming in, being carried or dragged down into the corridors, unable to even walk after interrogation. He described how he would sneak out during exercises and just grab a few moments to try and get into other detainees' cell doors just to ask them how they are. And he described the last time he had seen Neil, him not being very okay. He said that the interrogation was quite hard and that he had been assaulted and that his shirt had been torn and that he was going to keep that shirt as evidence. He also said that one time he passed him in the corridor and he called out to Neil and Neil didn't look up to him, and that made him very despondent. He also yet again describing what we've heard from other detainees of the night of when Aggett was found hanging in his cell, saying that he heard footsteps running quite hurriedly towards the cell of where Aggett was. But to speak more with me, we know that the impact of that detention as well as that time was not just hard on the political detainees but also on their families. And with me is the mother of Keith Coleman, Audrey. Thank you so much for speaking to us. You were quite involved or politically aware, during that time. Can you tell me that moment when you got the knock on the door in 1981 with the security police coming to your door and asking you, where's your son? Were you aware of what he was involved in, and what was that moment like?
Yes, we knew our son was actively involved in opposing apartheid. He was at university and he ran a newspaper, and we were very proud of him. I was part of the Black Sash, so we were not politically unaware of what was happening in the country. So we knew when they knocked on the door and wanted Keith that they were going to incarcerate him under the detention laws. Of course, any mother is very concerned and worried about the safety of their children, and we knew the conditions and the torture that was going on. So it wasn't easy. But nevertheless, we knew, that Keith was not involved in violence or anything, that he was working for a democratic South Africa.
We know once he was then detained at John Vorster, after he handed himself over, you became even more involved. Talk to me about the organization you were part of. What was its purpose, and what support did it provide for parents who are now on the outside waiting with almost no news of their children inside?
Yes, well, we came together as parents in 1981 as a small group. And we sat down and wondered what we could do and started demonstrating in the streets, calling for the release of our loved ones. and then slowly began demanding more and more from the government and speaking out to newspapers, to ambassadors, all sorts of people. And it became a very, very large organization under the name of Detainee Parent Support Committee. And we had offices in all little towns where there was repression, in Cape Town, Durban, all over South Africa. And it became a very large movement. And we opened offices that were advice offices for both parents and for detainees who were released. And we had lawyers panels, medical panel, counselling panels. We had great access to ambassadors. The diplomats were very important in helping us when we did street demonstrations and things like that. And, of course, the newspapers. The media was very important.
How important is an inquest like this in helping, find out the truth, but also for the families to finally get some kind of closure, but also for the greater society?
Well, I think that, the youth of today don't really know what happened in those days, and it should be part of the education system where they know of the parts of the different organizations and the various ways that we resisted. And it was a very important movement because it became worldwide. We actually spoke to governments in parliaments, on Capitol Hill, all over the place, about what was happening.
Thank you so much. That was Mrs. Coleman speaking to us at the Johannesburg High Court. We've just ended proceedings for this morning and for today. Tomorrow we will return and hopefully hear from a former security branch officer who was stationed at John Vorster Square during the time that Dr. Neil Aggett was incarcerated, and get some insight on the motivation, the interrogation, as well as what exactly led to Neil Aggett's body being found hanging in that cell almost 40 years ago. Back to you in studio.
Hasina Gori at the High Court in Johannesburg there. Let's go to